When HR teams need to communicate change, one of the biggest challenges is not just writing the message, it is getting people to actually notice it, understand it, and engage with it. That is where ChatGPT's image creation capability becomes useful. Today, I'm going to show how an internal HR team can use ChatGPT's Create Image capability to produce visual assets for a change communications workflow. In this example, the scenario is a new hybrid working policy rollout. The goal is not to replace a design team or create final brand-approved assets from scratch. The goal is to help HR move faster from a written message to a usable visual concept, and then refine that concept for different internal audiences. So the first step is to give ChatGPT a clear brief. What I'm doing here is giving ChatGPT the communication context, the audience, the tone, and the kind of visual I want. I'm not just asking it to generate an image, I'm framing the business purpose behind the image, which is what makes the output more useful. Now ChatGPT generates the first version. At this stage, I'm not expecting perfection. What I want is a strong first draft that gives me something visual to react to, and that is one of the main advantages here. Instead of starting from a blank page, I get an initial concept almost immediately. Now that I have a first version, I can start refining it for internal HR use. This step is important because many internal communications visuals need a very specific tone. They need to feel professional, calm, and credible. They should not look like consumer advertising or an overly polished marketing campaign. So here I'm using ChatGPT conversationally to push the image towards something that feels more appropriate for HR communications inside an enterprise. Once that update is generated, I can refine it further so it speaks more directly to the actual policy change. Now the image starts becoming more than just a generic office visual, it starts becoming a communication asset. I'm guiding the image so that it reflects the meaning of the policy update, in this case flexibility, collaboration, and clear expectations around how hybrid working will operate. I'm also asking for space for headline and supporting text because in practice this kind of visual often needs to sit inside an intranet page, internal email, slide, or HR announcement. The next step is where the workflow becomes especially useful for an HR team. Internal change communications often need multiple versions of the same core message. You may need one version for general employees, another for managers, and another for an intranet page or briefing pack. This shows how quickly the same visual concept can be adapted for a different audience. Instead of starting again, I can build from the original idea and ask for a more leadership-oriented version with a slightly more formal tone. That is especially useful for HR teams because internal policy rollouts rarely rely on a single piece of communication. They usually involve several assets across different channels and audiences. Now I'll create another variation, this time for employees in a broader hybrid environment. This lets me create a more employee-friendly version that reflects the lived reality of hybrid work, with both office and home settings represented. Again, the value here is speed and adaptability. ChatGPT is helping me move from one idea into several useful visual directions without needing to rebuild the brief each time. Finally, I can ask for a polished version that feels more presentation ready and suitable for wider internal use. This final step is about polish. At this point, I'm using ChatGPT not just to generate, but to improve. I'm narrowing in on a version that is cleaner, more usable, and more aligned to how an enterprise HR team would actually want to communicate a policy change, and that is really the core of the workflow. For HR teams, ChatGPT's Create Image capability is not just about making images, it is about helping internal teams turn change messages into clearer, more engaging communication assets. You can start with a written policy update, generate a first draft visual, refine it through natural language, and then create variants for different audiences and channels. That means HR can move faster when supporting policy rollouts, organizational change, benefits updates, onboarding, or internal announcements. Used this way, ChatGPT becomes less of a novelty and more of a practical visual communications assistant for internal teams.